Hello, welcome to the last video for the top X for the new set, March of the Machines. Today, we're going to be talking about the top 20 best cards in the set. We do have a couple honorable mentions, which I would think both of them could have a place in Pioneer. I just don't know exactly where. One of them, I do know where it could go. The other one is more of a sweet card that I just really like. So if you guys like this kind of content, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, hit that bell notification. Let me know what cards I missed down in the comments. Don't forget to look in the description where you can find a link to my Discord channel. Join it and let's get into the top 20. This is going to be a long one. Honorable mentions. We have Kolga and Yadaro, a 8 dinosaur turtle, 2 red, 2 green, 7/7 ETBs, Picket. Either gains trample and haste or it fights. You may pay 2 a red and a colorless, bring a green. Destroy up to 1 target artifact or enchantment. Shuffle it back into your library, then draw a card. It would be a lot cooler if it actually said you could do up to 1 of each. So artifact and an enchantment, but you know, that's fine. And it shuffles back in and you draw a card. Pretty good overall. 6 mana, 7/7 is reasonable stat line. So I actually like it overall. And I don't necessarily know if this ever would work into a bard class because it still would be 2 a red and a green to cast it. The other card on my list is Heliod, the Radiant Dawn. This is the light talk over about this card. I think this card could show up maybe in one deck, and that is Incarnation, right? So you basically sack a 3-drop art enchantment, you go get this ETBs, return an enchantment from your graveyard to your hand, fills back up your hand, and then late in the end step, your Incarnation sacks this, gets a 5-drop. So it's kind of like a decent bridge in between the 3 and the 5, and also, like I said, it gives you a card to cast the following turn. So I think that's where it actually shines. Now, it also, of course, could be transformed and turned into a 4/6, which is, you know, a fine statted creature, but I think it's more of a bridge card, so I think that's where I want to try it out. If there's any other decks that you guys would consider Heliod for, let me know down in the comments. Right now, that's all I could really think about regarding this card, is just maximizing the ETB trigger. And I think Incarnation is a great deck for that. Let's get into the top 20 best cards from the set. Number 20 on our list is Errant and Gahada. Now, this card I think only will show up if and only if Angels want this, right? So now you could argue that, well, they have the green one that's a shapeshifter that also technically, quote unquote, is an angel that has a similar effect. But this also, you can kind of argue that this is a removal spell and adjacent to it, right? It has flash. So if you have Gahada already down on the board, this thing can come down as a 5/6 potentially, and trade or block a big threat, take it out during combat, and then also, of course, let you cast Angels on top of your library. Now, that would also mean that Angels would switch over from being a mid-range aggro deck, mid-range/aggro, to more of a tempo style Angel list, where you would want the blue aspects into your deck, like protection spells, counter magic, stuff like that. So I don't know if that's necessarily what Angels would want to make this card a part of your deck, but if you're an Angel player, this might be in your consideration. And of course, if somehow there's ever a Flash Matters deck in blue and white, this might be in the list. But like I said, it is a human, but that is irrelevant, I think. This is the Angel portion, which I think is maybe has this card seeing a little bit of play in Pioneer. Let's get to number 19 on my list. Number 19 on my list is, in my opinion, the second best of the Prater cycle. Vorniclex, 3 green, 3 and 2 green. Trample, reach, 6/6. ETBs, search your library for 2 forest, reveal and put into your hand. Now, you could argue the Defiler Vigor. No, this is a different deck, right? So Vorniclex is more for if you're going to be playing cards like Dryad Veils and Grove, Azusa, anything that puts extra lands into play. So you would play Azusa, ramp into this, get 2 forests, play both forests for the turn, and just like that, you're at a Atraxa mana, which is why I'm going to probably play this card. This card is going to be the bridge between ramping into Atraxa and a 5-color ramp deck. So I think that's where this card's going to shine. It is not a card for just straight up mid-range or whatever. This is more to find, most of the time, it should be a deck that is multicolored, right? Because you have to actively care about two different, if you're just getting two basics with this, you're probably not building it right, because there's probably better options for getting two basics. So yeah, I think this card is going to be great for multicolor decks to get 2 forests. It does flip over for 6 and 2 green, transforms, and you mill 10, put 2 creatures that milled that way into play. So Atroxa for 8 mana, you get to mill, hopefully hit Atroxa. But at that point, you might be taking so many cards out of your deck, you might be milling yourself out. And the second mode, you distribute 7+1/+1 counters, which could work also, of course, in Hardened Scales, but I think Defiler Vigor is better if you're looking for a 5-drop for that deck. And having all your big creatures have fight in the last mode is quite relevant. I believe it should make Vorniclex also have this ability. I don't think the until in a turn creature control gain it resolves, you get to flip it over. I'm not sure on how that's actually going to play out, because that was the case. This is the only one of the cycle I think that doesn't actually work with greatly with their last mode. The other Prater on the list, featured down the line, works really good with this third mode. So I think this card is actually relatively decent. I'm going to be trying it out, like I said, in a 5-color ramp deck. Let's see how that works out. And let's get in number 18 on our list, because there's still a lot of cards to go. Number 18 on my list is the first battle on the top 20. Invasion of Tolvada. ETBs, you return a non-battle permanent from your graveyard to your battlefield. What's great about this over the previous variants of like return target battlefield or return target permanent to the battlefield, this works with Elesh Norn, the other ones really don't. So you could return 2 things for 5 mana, which is actually quite good. And it's in the color combination for Elesh Norn, so that could be a possibility. I don't know exactly where I want to play it. I could add it to my Mardoom Reanimator spell deck. I might try it. But if you manage to deal 5 damage to this, it flips over. It gives creatures you control get +1. Oh, and have lifelink. And then at each end step, you create a 1/1 white-black spirit token with flying, so it kind of makes Lingering Soul tokens. I think this card is actually quite awesome. It's a maybe a 2/3 of in a deck, but I think it's still a reasonable consideration if you're a Reanimator deck in Pioneer, which we actually need to be finding a ultimate defined brew for Pioneer Reanimator, because right now it's not really a deck. And I will be featuring a video soon that has it, I think next week, but this is also a new card that could very well push that into the next caliber. So let's get number 17 on my list. Number 17 on my list is a dual effort, and it's just 2 sweepers that are available in this next set. One of them, Invasion of Fiora, which comes ETB, destroy all non-legends or legends, or both. And then you flip it over, it becomes Marchesa, Resolute Monarch. Whenever it attacks, basically you could flip a battle most of the time. So it's kind of awesome how this works with other battles. So if you're ever in like in a Rakdos, like a mid-range shell, this could be both of these cards could be in the list, because there's also that dinosaur. We'll be talking about it later, that helps with battles. So, and Invasion of Karis, ETBs deals 3 damage to each planeswalker and creature. If this hit battle too, oh my god, it would be so strong. But the backside, ward, pay 2 life. Whenever you cast a spell, it deals 2 damage to each opponent. So I think both of these cards are interesting. Like I said, if there is a Battles Matter deck, I think it would be in these 2 colors. Because they have the best sorcery speed battles out of the color combinations, and I think they both can target and hit battles quite well. Let's get into the number 16 on my list. Number 16 on my list is Ancient Empirosaur. 5 and 2 green, Convoke, Trample, Ward 2. When it ETBs, you may put 2+++1 counters on it for each creature that convoked it this way. So if you do tap 7 creatures, this is a 2020, I believe, which is quite powerful. And inside of dinosaurs, there's multiple ways to give this thing haste. So it could be a fun one-shot dinosaur that is definitely just awesome. So, but I think this card is just arguably good. Even if you tap 3 creatures with it, it becomes a 12/12 for I believe, yeah. So that's like not bad. So it does scale quite well. And there is a decent amount of dinosaurs that you're not always guaranteed to attack with each turn. But a lot of the time, dinosaurs are quite aggressively statted. So it might be difficult to tap down for this. So I might have to go in a different type of deck that's more of like elves or small creatures that have some sort of advantage with trample. So I'm interested in trying it. So if you guys want to see that card, let me know down in the comments, and I will definitely consider brewing around it. All right, so number 15 on my list is Kroxon and Kroxon. Man, I felt like my voice is going bad. It's 3 red, white, and a black, and it is a 6/6 Vigilance Menace lifelink. This is actually one of my favorite cards of the set, hands down. It reminds me of the old school one of each colored Titan when it had an ETB and an attack trigger. So it really excites me. This is actually the card that I was talking about the other day in the Sleepers video. No, Jank video. Where you can play Hazoret, attack, dig, find this, ETB, eat 5 cards from your yard, reanimate. It's actually quite powerful for a 5 mana in total. But so whenever this attacks or ETBs, you may exile 5 cards from your graveyard. When you do, you may return a creature from your graveyard to the battlefield. This also in Modern has combo possibilities with Altar of Dementia, where you can sack this, target yourself, mill 6, sack it, mill 6 with the this on the stack, right? So you get it down, you sack it with Altar Dementia with this on the stack still, and then you use this ability to target itself, bring it back, and then you sack it again with the ETB trigger on the stack. And you just repeat till your deck is gone. Until you can't, I guess, bring it back anymore. But that is Kroxon and Kroxon, which I'm actually quite excited for. The Elder Giant Dog, which is kind of awesome. I kind of wish, though, that it was a different color combination, but it's definitely got me excited for to play white and black, which are my least favorite 2 colors. Because they're just, to me, they're slow and grindy. I like green, red, smash face, gruel style. This card is awesome. I want to try it. Number 14 on my list, Grafted Butcher. This card is actually one of the better lords I've ever seen. The reason why it's on number 14 on my list is because of the fact that it's a lord for Phyrexians. It's actually quite powerful though. ATBs, all your Phyrexians get menaced at end of turn, and it buffs them. You may sacrifice an artifact or a creature, return it from the graveyard to the battlefield anytime you could as a sorcery for 3 and a black. So why this is much lower on the list is because of the fact that I don't know how good Phyrexians will be in Pioneer or Modern. So it might have less of an impact than the cards in front of this, just because of the fact that Phyrexians, outside of the, Shieldred and Elish Norn in the last 2 sets, I mean, a lot of the Phyrexians are just kind of meh. They're not really amazing. We're going to be talking about another Prater later on. I don't think this Prater goes with Vorniclex at all. It's just not, it doesn't vibe very well together. But still think this card could be quite awesome. And maybe a future, if we get more future Phyrexians for Pioneer or Modern, maybe this becomes a thing. Let's get into number 13 on my list. So number 13 on my list is the only removal spell of the entire top 20. This is definitely the best single 1-for-1 removal spell in the set. It potentially could be a free destroy target creature or planeswalker or Surveilled 2. So it's kind of like draw 1.5 a card. I think Surveil 4 is like draw 1 card. I don't really think Surveil 2 is the equivalent of a draw a card because you don't really get card advantage. I think this card could be a solid option, especially if you pair it up with maybe Stitcher Supplier and stuff like that, where you're blocking with Supplier, tapping it, killing a different threat. Seems like a good play line. So I think this actually is a good removal spell. That's all I got to really say about it. Let's get into number 12 on my list. Number 12 is Omnath, Locus of Awe. White, blue, Phyrexian black, red, and a green. if you may lose unspent mana, that becomes black instead. It doesn't state that. It doesn't. It's like the green, the original green one. So you should be able to keep that into your mana pool at all times. And at the beginning of your combat main phase, you may look at the top card of your library. You may reveal that card. If it has 3 or more color mana symbols in its mana cost, if you do, add it 3 of that color, add 3 mana any combination of its colors, and you put it into your hand. If you don't, reveal it, put it into your hand. So basically, every single turn, pre-combat main phase, the beginning, you get to draw a card. And if you build your deck correctly and you run nothing but 3 colored cards, like Void Rend, etc., like that, this card could punish your opponent quite fast and just, explode in value. So I think this card is actually quite good. And you also could just, float your mana at your opponent's end step and just you bank that mana till the following turn. So there's a lot of possibility, I think, with this card. It's not as strong, of course, as 4-color Omnath, but I definitely think it's the second best of the Omnath cycle, which means it's still a very good card. And let's get into number 11. Number 11 on my list is Osloth, the Shattered Spire. 1 in a green. If 1 or more +1/+1 counters be put on an artifact or a creature you control, that many +1/+1 counters are put on to instead. Now, keep in mind, actually, I didn't even think about it. The artifact clause on this, if one of your creatures dies, you have the other Osloth. Well, then I guess the counters get doubled on that Osloth. And then an additional counter gets put on that Osloth. So that is something to be, to keep in mind. The heart and scales don't normally cover, right? And you may pay a colorless and a green, put a +1 counter onto an artifact or a creature you control, only as a sorcery. And if you have multiple copies, you could cycle this for 2. So I think this card actually is quite good for Pioneer. Heart and Scales, I don't know how many copies you actually will be running, since you traditionally are 2-colored. You have Heart and Scales, and then you have either the Snake or the Selesnya one. So I don't really know which one of those two, like adjacent to that, how many you would run outside of that, right? I think this could be a solid, 9, 10, 11, 12, or if you're going into like Adapt, so Simic, you could also have this be your 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th. So it could actually open up possibilities for other color combinations. Green-red is another one, right? There's a lot of... Red cares a lot about modified creatures. Green and red could be a nice pairing with this card. So I think this card could be relatively pretty strong in Pioneer. I think Modern, it may show up, but I highly doubt it. It already has Osloth. And it's not 1 mana to work with Urza Saga. So I'm not really sure if this could show up in Modern. But I like it for Pioneer for sure. Let's get into the number 10 card on our list. And we're halfway. Man, this feels like a long one. Number 10 on my list is Rampaging Raptor. 2 and 2 red for a 4/4 with Trample and Haste. You get to Dragon Fire for 2 and a red. So, 6 mana, you get to pump 4 into it, make it an 8/4. Whenever this creature deals combat damage to an opponent, it deals that much damage to target Planeswalker or battle that player. This is actually a really good card. Like I said, if you went into Rakdos Battle Matters, right, you can destroy all the legends, leave this guy, smash face, remove 4 counters from the battle. So it's great because you still apply pressure to your opponent's life total and the battle. So it really helps with multiple interactions. The other thing I like about this card is there was not really ever a good red dinosaur at the 4-drop slot. So you always were kind of stuck to Gruul. So if there ever happened to be an opportunity where maybe you want Boros, because Boros has the 1-drop dinosaur discounter, and then it also has, the Raptor and the Huntmaster. So you could maybe cheat this thing down for 2 mana, 2 red, and it might be pretty relatively easy to accomplish that. So it does fill a need that dinosaurs technically didn't have, which is, like I said, a great 4-drop that's not green. I don't know how that pans out. That might be one of the first color combos I try outside of combo oriented dinosaurs or janky dinosaurs that I might want to try is Boros and see how this works out. The other thing that could be a possibility here that I guess we did visit a long time ago was Mardu dinosaurs. Again, our 4-drop slot was the mutate Mardu guy that basically gives something double strike. If we would have had more possibilities for a 4-drop that was aggressively statted, maybe that deck would have been performed a lot better, and it could be a more optimal build. So like I said, I really am interested to see how a non-green variant works out with this. If you're in green, I think you might still pick the other two because they align with 2 elves. So traditionally I play 6 elves in my dinosaur deck, and they only tap for green. So I think this is definitely a huge addition for dinosaurs, and hopefully it showcases what the future set's going to be like. The one downside I gotta mention about this card, I would have been a lot cooler if the last mode was Enrage, right? So if it dealt damage, if damage would be dealt to it deals that much damage to target Planeswalker or battle. That, in my opinion, would have been more on flavor with dinosaurs. But then again, this dinosaur might not be from the plane of Ixalan. So, all right, so let's get into number 9 on my list after rambling about a dinosaur. Number 9 on my list is Invasion of Tarkir. So there's 2, I think, left over. This for battles. I think this is the one that it's like high reward, high low, right? So like one hand, this card screams out like semi-weaker version of Bone Crusher Giant. 1 in a red. ETBs me reveal any amount of dragons in your hand, and it deals 2 damage plus X based on how many you reveal. So if you reveal 1 dragon, it's 3 damage. 2, it's 4. Scales up by 1. So I think this card actually could be quite awesome, especially in a Dragon Matters deck. God, I need to stop saying that dinosaur word. I think it could be good in that kind of deck. I have constructed a Jeskai Dragons list for next season. I hope this card shines in that shell. Now, if it is not hard to flip a battle, this card could see a lot of play because it flips over to a 4/4 Flample that whenever a dragon you control attacks, it deals 2 damage to any target. So it just pumps out the mass amount of damage that dragons could do in a given turn. So I'm kind of excited about trying this. So I think this is one of the ones where can't flip it. Is a 2-mana stomp, sorcery speed stomp worth it? I'm not exactly sure. The only other possibilities, if you could, like Elshnorn, which I guess would double it, but at that point you're not playing dragons. So if you ever get a dragon that's, like an Elshnorn where it doubles each permanent enter the battlefield triggers, that might be pretty awesome and adjacent to this, but I'm not exactly sold, especially since, dragons are probably the best tribe that have spells that are calling out for the type. Because we do have Scorn, which is basically a counter spell if you reveal a dragon. So there's a lot of if you reveal a dragon style cards in that tribe, so it's kind of cool. And this just is another piece that could make that deck work more. So we'll see how that works out in this next season. Let's get into number 8 on my list. Number 8 on my list is a card that started off in the top 5 and has slowly has dropped down to number 8. And I think this card could show up. I have it in a Tarkir red list for next season. I think it could be good there because it's nice to be able to fly over your opponent's threats. And I mean, casting an instant or sorcery like a Tarkir's command and paying a single red, get it back, get a haste, smack face. Seems like it's a great card for an aggressively statted red deck. Might want it. So I think it could very well be a decent card for that strategy. I don't necessarily know if it fits into mono red burn, but it could. If there's ever what we need is lightning axe that could hit face for 3 damage or something like that, where you could discard a card and pay 1 red, deal 3 damage to target creature or player. That would be kind of cool. That would work quite well with this card, but I think this card is actually quite awesome, and I'm looking forward to trying out the Phoenix. So let's get in number 7 on my list. Now, number 7 on my list is, in my opinion, the best Prater from this set. 2 and 2 red for 4/4 first strike. that's reasonable stats. I do like the fact that since he did die, they did give him actually a good card for once. Thank you, Wizards. But what I like about this card is whenever you cast Sinister Sorcery, he deals 1 damage to your opponent, and you add 1 red to your mana pool. And then you can pay a red, exile this, and flip it to the backside, which immediately just deals 3 damage to target opponent and each creature they control. Then the following turn, you create 3 treasures to prepare for your massive flashback turn. And then the last turn, you can storm off and cast more burn. So I think this card actually is quite good because of the fact that there's probably a decent amount of red cards that are just 1 mana, draw a card, replace itself, kind of like a free spell. And then you can get to the last mode, cast like 15 and just keep Grape Shot in your opponent. So I think this card is actively quite cool, and it might produce a mono red burn list that is not in Pioneer now. And it's not going to be the same as traditional burn, right? Because you probably would be running Runaway Steamkin, Burgie, in this. That is something I think could be interesting. I'm definitely going to be trying it this season. Expect it in my Wednesday special for Much Brew. Number 6 on my list, Ren and Realm Breaker. 1 and 2 green. Me being a green player, this is actually kind of cool. My biggest problem with beef with this card is it does nothing that any deck that I think of right now would want. And its abilities are reasonable, but not like overly busted by any means. So right now I'm going to be trying it out in a Greasefang list because it can mill 3, put a permanent from among them in Greasefang, put it in your hand. See if that actually works out for the -12. And then you may cast Greasefangs from your library if you bring your lands. I mean, you may play lands and Greasefang from your graveyard. You can cast them. So it does work quite well with getting Greasefang out of the graveyard. Outside of that, the +1 doesn't really protect itself on turn 2. So it just comes down, makes a 3/3 that's vulnerable up to 1 land. So I guess you don't have to turn it on. The following turn, I guess you turn it up again. And hopefully you can protect it with your dorks or something. But she can't really protect herself all that well. And if she does protect herself, means you're basically going down a land for the turn, right? Because it doesn't untap it. So you're not, instead of having 4 mana available, you might only have 3 mana available. She just restricts your ability to cast spells. So I guess unless you just cherry it, that's a possibility. And the cat tokens protect it. But I don't think this card actively does enough to make it better than something like Liliana the Veil as a 3-drop planeswalker. But we're going to try it out. We're going to see. If you have any suggestions on how to make Ren and Realm Breaker better, let me know down in the comments because I would be interested to see how to break her. That's kind of ironic. Realm Breaker, I don't know. And let's get into the top 5 on my list. Each one of these cards I think are going to be sweet. Number 5 is Brawl and Curry Zev. First strike, menace, 1 red and a blue, 2/4. Whenever you cast your first instant sorcery spell, each turn you may cast a spell with a lesser mana value that shares a type with it, without paying its mana cost. If you don't, create a legendary first mate Ragavan, 2/1 with haste. So this card, either you're going to be actively brewing an all instants matter deck or an all sorceries matter deck. Depending on how you brew it, I think that's the way to go. What I like about this card is you technically, like for instance, in the Staples video, I talked about the Convoke, draw 2 and instant speed. If you're all instant matters, that's 4 mana spell that you may have tapped tokens for with this, and then you get to play an additional 3-drop or 4-drops instant from your hand, which actually is quite powerful if you think about it, because you could tap 4 tokens, cast the draw 2 in response to a spell on their side of the stack, counter the spell, draw 2. So I really like this as a draw go type spell or piece. So I might try this in the deck list that has the 8 Pyromancers as a 2 of, because it's 3 mana, so it's a little bit higher on the curve maybe than what we want. I'm super excited about trying it. I think this card actually could be quite awesome. And it creates a red pirate too, so you can convoke it, the Ragavan. let me know down in the comments what cards you guys would consider for this card to break it. And let's get into number 4 on our list, because each one of these cards probably has something that can make this card absurd. Number 4 on our list is the Invasions of Icyoria, X 2 green, ETBs, search your library for a library or graveyard for a non-human creature with mana value extra less to put it on the battlefield. If you search your library this way, shuffle. So it's 2 green X. Mainly this is going to get a Vampire Hex Mage. So 2 green and 2 X. Get a Hex Mage. Take the counters off this. Flip it into the 8/8. And for each non-human creature you control, you may have that creature assign combat damages if it wasn't blocked, which is kind of awesome. So I do have a deck list already brewed with this combination in it. So I'm hoping this card actually works out. I think I only have 1 Hex Mage in there. I don't think it's necessarily, something you always want to go for. Most of the time, you could just go for Dryad Arbor or get infinite mana. But as a backup plan, you could always get the 1 of Hex Mage, flip over Icyoria, and get an 8/8 dinosaur and smash face with it, which is always a good time. If there is any other combinations other than the Parasite and Hex Mage that you can think of to make this card even better, let me know down in the comments. And let's get into number 3 on my list. Number 3 on my list is Lucernos Reborn. This is actually one of the sweetest cards in the set. I am excited about trying this. I do like Wormcoil, so I like the fact that there is a semi-Wormcoil on the backside of this card, which I believe Wormcoil itself was. But 3 green for 4/5 with reach is basically the Baloth stats, so that's not bad. It can block spirits quite well, so that's kind of nice. And in mono green, Stompy Devotion, which is what I brewed for it. You know, you could easily pay the 6 and 2 life to flip it over to a 6/6 reach lifelink. Whenever it dies or another Hydra dies, you may create a 3/3 green and white Phyrexian Hydra token with reach and a green-white Phyrexian token, Hydra token with lifelink. So I think this is an awesome card. I love the throwback. I do only have 3 in the list. I cut 1 for another pack leader because of the fact that it is legendary. So that is a negative to it. But I think this card is really good and it's going to make an impact, I think, on day 1 in Pioneer. So let's get into number 2 on my list is Rona, Herald of Invasion. A 1 blue and a blue. Whenever you cast a legendary spell, you may untap it. You may tap it to draw a card and discard a card. So what I like about this, if you're in a Legends Matters deck, you could probably potentially go through most of your deck pretty quickly. And it's kind of like the Jace that used to draw a card, discard a card, flips over to a Planeswalker. But for this one, it's 5 and a Phyrexian black. You could flip it over to a Rona Tolarian Obliterator. It's a 5/5 with trample, and whenever a source deals damage to it, its controller exiles a card from their hand at random. If it's a land, you may put it on the battlefield under control. Otherwise, you may cast it without paying its mana cost. So what's awesome about this card, if you run it alongside of a stuff like instant speed, lightning strikes, stuff like that, if you can get your hand down to like 2 cards in it, a burn spell and whatever you want, cheat it into play, you can. So this technically can get you a Omniscience into play. All you need is get down to 2 cards, you bolt this, but then again, I guess at that point, Omniscience really isn't doing much, is it? Because you have no cards in hand. So I guess that doesn't really work. But, there could be something else that, you might want to put into play. It does say cast, so you still get the Emrakul triggers, Ulamog triggers. So that is a possibility. You get down to having just an Ulamog in hand, you shock this, and you get to flat cast a free Ulamog, exile 2 cards. Seems pretty reasonable. So I think this card is going to be awesome for both sides, right? So your opponent can't really deal damage to this, otherwise they're kind of getting their hand ripped apart at random. And you have a kind of a weird, janky way of casting something huge, like Big Mommy. In Modern, right? If you can get the big Emrakul down, take an extra turn, wow, that is actually right on the dot, right? So if you can flip it over for 5, if you have 6 mana, you could deal damage to it, and flip play Emrakul, and that's actually 20 damage, 15, 15, and a 5/5, and attack for 20. So that's an interesting combination. But like I said, the front side is where I'm excited about it. It doesn't get got by Stomp. 3 damage does minimize what Fury could do to it, right? So if you have other creatures on board, if they're devoting 3 damage to this, then, I mean, you still have other board presence. So the toughness, I think, matters more in Modern, destroying a lot of the top cards. It is worse, of course, against Solitude. Gaining a life isn't really that big of a downside for your opponent. But I think this card is actively pretty good. And it's going to be, I think, a solid role player in Pioneer. Like I said, none of these cards are overly busted. I think they're just really sweet adjacent cards to be added. And there is no Fable the Mirror Breakers in the set. So, number 1 on my list is Thalia and the Gitrog monster. I have to say this is probably the best card. Now, like, I'm thinking about it in adjacent to Abzan, right? So it does kind of a lot of different things, right? So it makes your opponent creatures come into play tapped, and they're on basic land, so it could basically tax your opponent out of the game a little bit. Well, you're getting aggressive with a first strike Death Toucher for 4/4. So that's quite powerful. And then you get to draw cards when it attacks by sacrificing a creature or a land. It's better than Gitrog, the original Gitrog, because it forced you to sack a land. Maybe you want to sack some dorks instead, which is quite nice. This card does that. And you get to play additional lands. So I'm not sure how this card is going to stack up against the rest of the 4-drops in the format, but it's definitely in consideration. Right now I have it in an Abzan mid-range shell. Now, I picked this card because it does allow me to have Jeff. So I think that's good. This is the best 4-drop in Pioneer that lets you have Jeff. So that actually, I think, is the biggest reason to try this card and play this card in the format. Of course, Shelly arguably is better, depending on what matchups, especially what matchups you're facing, because it's better against Lotus Field, where they draw a bunch of cards to combo off, take a bunch of damage. So that actually is good in those matchups. But this one, I think, is just the best 4-drop for Jeff. If you don't know who Jeff is, it's Jingatha. So since this does not have any two of the same colors, and it's a 4-drop 4/4, which is a fine rated stat, basically trades profitably every time it attacks or blocks. And it makes your opponent play stuff tap down. So I'm going to be trying out like Abzan, mid-range shell, alongside Siege Rhino. Because that's one of my favorite pet cards. So if I am in Abzan, I'm definitely playing Siege Rhino. But I think I'm excited about trying this card too, and Glissa. So I think this is going to be an amazing card paired alongside Glissa. And also, if you wanted to do more of an Abzan Death and Taxes, that's a possibility too. This is your top end. You play Thalia, Baby Thalia, Big Thalia into this. And just tax your opponent's spells out of the game. Smash face, get a little bit of card advantage. Make sure your hand's filled with really good quality cards, not just quantity. And it allows you to win against control, against other matchups. And of course, since this is in black, it lets you have Thoughtseize. The second best color is white in Pioneer, so it also includes that color combination. So you get Vanishing Verse. And of course, green, still struggling. Still struggling. Let me know in the comments what cards you guys would have considered for this list that I did not include. Where do you disagree with my list? I want to know down in the comments. Am I wrong? Is Thalia not the best card in the set? What is your guys' opinion of the best card in the set? Was I wrong to put Ren at like number 5 or number 6 on the list? Let me know that as well, because I think the card has a lot of potential, but I'm just not sold that it's going to make immediate impact like these other cards will. Until next time, when we have the last week of Phyrexian All-Be-One season, the following week we kick off with 3 different decks that I have. I'm just waiting to record them, so whenever they drop on the 18th of April, I'm going to record them, and I'm super looking forward to it. Talk to you soon.